Hey babe, just checking in. Are you home yet?
Not yet. I'll be late. Got something to sort out.
Everything okay?
Actually, no. We need to talk. The afternoon sunlight of Phoenix stretched long across the road. Hannah Walker usually drove home on after each long shift at the hospital. She was a seasoned nurse, 35 years old, living with her husband, Greg, and their 10-year-old son, Ryan. Their small apartment sat quietly in a peaceful suburban neighborhood in the northern part of the city. Life wasn't luxurious, but until recently, Hannah always believed that as long as the family stood united, any hardship could be overcome. But all that belief collapsed in less than 24 hours, starting with an email. During a quick break between shifts, Hannah received an email from Greg. The subject line contained only 2 words: "I'm sorry." Her heart sank. Her hand trembled as she clicked. The content crushed her like a vice on her chest. "I know this will shock you, but I have to be honest with myself. I've met someone else. It all started as just fun, but now I want to get serious with her. I've taken the camper van. It's in your name so you can handle the loan payments. Wish you all the best." Wait, what? Hannah froze. Financial fraud? Secret escape? A love triangle? This was the worst case scenario anyone could imagine living through. She immediately called Greg. Her heart pounded, each beat hitting the core of a wife who had just been betrayed. "Greg, I just read the email. Is this a joke?" His voice came cold and flat. "No, Hannah. I've made my decision. Don't call me again." Click. The call ended without another word. In that moment, Hannah felt like her entire world had crumbled. Not just because of the betrayal, but because of the way Greg had turned her into a debtor with no way out. The $35,000 camper van they had once eagerly planned for family road trips now turned into a financial joke. Greg had failed the financing review, and she, in blind trust, had taken the loan under her name. Now he was driving it off with his mistress, leaving her with a mountain of debt and a young boy still waiting for his father to come home for dinner. Hannah asked herself, how could someone who once shared every dream with me turn his back so cruelly? Greg was never the ideal husband, but Hannah always thought he was trying. The past 3 years, Greg had a stable job, something he never managed before during their marriage. He often spoke about creating memories together, taking Ryan out to explore nature, living kindly with one another. Those words now echoed in her mind like mockery. Less than 48 hours later, when Hannah checked the bank account, she discovered nearly $20,000 in savings had been completely wiped out. Money she had quietly saved since her single days, dollar by dollar, from exhausting night shifts, from skipping that dress she liked, from postponing vacations because they had to save for the future. The pain of betrayal now doubled with a devastating financial blow. She had not only lost her husband, but also the financial foundation for her and her son. She drove home with a blank mind. The kitchen where they used to cook dinner together was now cold. The family photo on the shelf stirred up once beautiful memories, now nothing more than illusions. Ryan walked into the room, his eyes a mix of innocence and suspicion. "Mom, why aren't you eating anything?" "I'm just a little tired, honey." "Tired is one thing, but your eyes look sad." "Ryan, maybe there's something you need to know." With every tear that fell, Hannah not only lost her faith in her husband, but also learned the first lesson of a modern woman in American society. Never trade your independence just because you believe someone will always stay. Her life was about to turn the page, painful, messy, but also the beginning of a spectacular rise. And Hannah wouldn't fight alone, because beside her stood a 10-year-old child, smart, compassionate Ryan, the one who would never let her fall. The next morning, Hannah Walker woke up in a house so quiet it was frightening. The early sunlight streamed through the curtains, but it wasn't enough to warm her weary soul. She got out of bed like a machine, made a cup of coffee, then sat in silence staring into space. Her mind was heavy, her heart aching, not just because Greg had left, but because everything was collapsing at a pace she could no longer control. The night before, she had tried not to cry in front of Ryan. But once the boy was asleep, Hannah sat alone in the living room, hugging a pillow, letting the tears fall as if she had never cried before. She felt as though she were drowning in an ocean of emotions with no lifeline in sight. Greg's betrayal wasn't just a punch to the heart, it was a knife to her spirit. Slow, deep, and hard to heal. She had spent over a decade building a family, only for the man she trusted to choose to ghost his wife and child like some toxic guy off Tinder. She tried to act normal, went to work, talked to colleagues, smiled when necessary. But inside, everything was in ruins. Sleep became fragmented. Headaches came in relentless waves pounding at her temples. Her emotions rose and crashed like a roller coaster. She began to lose all feeling for food, for time, for her own body. It all peaked on Monday morning when the hospital held an internal training session. Hannah tried to attend, even though she had barely slept the night before. While listening to a colleague present, her vision started to blur. Sounds became distorted. Her heart pounded. Cold sweat trickled down her neck and her knees buckled. "Are you okay, Hannah?" a colleague asked, concerned. She didn't have time to answer. Everything spun and then went dark. When she opened her eyes, the familiar hospital ceiling loomed above. An IV was running into her left arm. She exhaled heavily, not out of shock, but exhaustion. She was used to caring for patients. Now she had become one of them. The feeling made her feel as though she had hit rock bottom. "You're exhausted," the doctor said after the examination. "Not just physically, but emotionally. We need to run further tests, but for now, you need to be admitted for monitoring." Hannah said nothing. She felt like a phone with a drained battery and no one to plug it in. Her heart felt hollow. She wanted to run away from that room, from reality, from the humiliation of becoming a victim at the hands of the man she once thought was her safe haven. That afternoon, the hospital room door burst open. Ryan, her little boy, rushed in, his face filled with worry and tears brimming in his eyes. No longer the calm child he usually was. No longer prematurely mature. "Mom, are you dying?" the boy asked, breathless. "Of course not, baby. I wouldn't leave you. Never." Ryan threw himself into her arms, holding her tight as if afraid she might vanish. Hannah gently patted his back, feeling for the first time in days that she still had a reason to get up. No matter how much it hurt, she couldn't afford to fall, but life still wasn't done testing her. After 3 days in the hospital, Hannah checked her bank account and discovered something horrifying. The savings left after the car purchase, around $20,000, had completely vanished. The account balance now showed only $33. Her face turned pale. She scrambled to investigate and confirmed Greg had withdrawn the entire amount while she was hospitalized. A surge of rage, bitterness, and helplessness overwhelmed her. She clenched her fists until they trembled. No more car, no more money, unable to work. And Greg, still completely unreachable. This is the limit, she thought. This is where I rise. Not for herself, but for Ryan, for the future, and for a silent vow in her heart. No one would ever have the power to bring Hannah Walker down again. From that moment on, Hannah was no longer a victim. She was a warrior. That night, in the small apartment now absent of laughter, Hannah lay quietly on her hospital bed, her eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. She didn't know where to start again. She had lost almost everything: her husband, money, health, and even her trust. But then a gentle knock on the door interrupted her chaotic stream of thoughts. Ryan stepped in with a quiet gait and a face more serious than his 10 years. In his hands was a paper bag with a sandwich and a bottle of orange juice. "Mom, I'm not sure if this is the kind you like, but it has vitamin C," he said, like a little grown-up trying to do something kind. Hannah burst out laughing, her first smile in days. "You're my little angel." Ryan sat down at the edge of the bed, looked at his mother for a long moment, then said, "Mom, you don't have to hide it from me anymore. I know Dad left, and now you're carrying everything alone." Hannah froze. She didn't expect her son to understand so much. "How did you know?" "I observe. When adults lie, they don't look straight. When you said, 'I'm okay,' your eyes looked to the right. That's a sign." Ryan paused for a moment, then added, "Also, I heard you calling the bank. I know the account was emptied. There was no lying to a child like this. Not this child." Hannah swallowed her tears, held her son's hand. "Ryan, I'm sorry, I just didn't want you to worry." Ryan shook his head. "It's okay." Now you just need to get better. As for getting back what we lost, I have a plan." A spark of light flickered in Hannah's eyes. A plan. She was both surprised and slightly worried. "I think we can find Dad," Ryan said, his voice unexpectedly calm. "I know you think he ran away and can't be found. But remember that time I got lost during the hiking trip?" Hannah nodded slowly. "After that, you and Dad got me a GPS phone for kids. And we also installed the app on Dad's phone, remember?" Hannah's heart started to race. "Wait, you're saying we can track Dad?" Ryan nodded. "Exactly. I logged into the app and checked. Dad's phone is still on, and he's at a park near our house." A whirlwind of emotions swept through Hannah: shock, astonishment, and a glimmer of hope. Greg, the man who wrecked her life, was still within reach. And more than that, it was Ryan, the child she feared would be most hurt, who was now leading her toward a reversal of fate. "What else have you done?" Hannah asked, unable to hide her amazement. "I took a screenshot of the location, recorded the time, and even talked to someone who used to work at Dad's office," Ryan replied, as if presenting a school project. "They said Dad quit, but he once brought a woman with him to a company party. I think that's the woman from the email he mentioned. Mom, it's time to take everything back. Not just the car, the money, but your dignity. I won't let you fight alone." Hannah was speechless. In that moment, she no longer saw a 10-year-old boy, but a companion, intelligent, brave, and full of love. A new emotion surged in Hannah's heart. No longer pain or despair, but faith. Faith in herself, in Ryan, in the truth. The child she had tried so hard to protect had become the one to lift her up. "You're a little genius, you know that?" she said, pulling Ryan into her arms. "No, I'm just someone who doesn't want to see you cry anymore." That night in the quiet hospital room, a silent plan was drawn, not by a broken mother, but by a courageous child. And that was the true beginning of a journey to reclaim justice, one that Hannah would no longer walk alone. 3 days after Hannah was discharged from the hospital, Arizona welcomed an early season breeze carrying the scent of pine resin and rustling leaves. In the crisp chill of Sunday morning, Hannah's old car rolled along the road leading to Tonto National Forest, where the GPS signal on Ryan's phone had tracked Greg's location. Not a hotel, not a friend's house, but a deserted campsite with only a few campers scattered among the tall pine trees. Hannah sat behind the wheel, her hands gripping it so tightly her knuckles turned white. Ryan sat beside her, silent, but his eyes focused on the phone screen. "We're almost there," he said softly. The police had already been contacted, thanks to a report Hannah filed about the stolen vehicle and suspected asset misappropriation. But even she didn't expect, when she turned off the engine at the grassy edge of the forest, to see two officers already questioning a man with messy hair, wearing a wrinkled gray hoodie. Greg. The camper van was parked behind him, still covered in dust from the trip, and next to him stood a strange woman, presumably Mandy, the mistress Hannah had only heard by name, now vividly present with a slightly swollen belly and shameless eyes. Hannah stepped out of the car, heart racing. Greg turned around, his face going pale at the sight of her. Ryan followed his mother, his eyes sharp as blades. "We need to talk privately," Hannah told the officers. The two looked at each other, nodded, and stepped back a few feet, leaving space for what would become the most intense confrontation in all three of their lives. Greg pulled Hannah and Ryan into the camper, visibly flustered. Mandy sat cross-legged, her gaze full of disdain. "What more do you want, Greg?" Hannah began, her voice hard as steel. "I came to take back what's mine." Greg smirked faintly, but he was trembling. "It's just, I borrowed the van for a while, between husband and wife." "We're no longer husband and wife, Greg." Ryan cut in, his voice surprisingly firm. "You filed for divorce. Mom owes you nothing, and that van, it's in her name. You have no right to drive a single inch of it." Greg froze. Mandy laughed, but it was a bitter, mocking kind of laugh. "My God, a kid talking like a lawyer. No wonder your husband left. You're too cold, Hannah." Hannah turned to Mandy, her gaze sharp as a razor. "You think seducing an unemployed man, wrecking a family, and stealing money is attractive? You're not just the other woman. You're an accomplice." The air inside the van turned thick. Greg fumbled to say something, but Ryan didn't let him. I just want to ask one thing, Dad. Why? Greg looked at Ryan, the son he once cradled as a baby, now standing tall before him like a grown man. No one spoke for a few seconds. Then Greg looked down, his voice faltering. I didn't think things would turn out like this. I just wanted to start over. What about my mom's life? Ryan asked. She had to start over from below zero. Do you even know that? Greg didn't answer. Hannah stood up. Game's over. Give back the van. Return the money, or the police will come right back. Greg looked at her, then at the keys lying on the table. Finally, like a loser in the very game he had set up, he handed them to Hannah. And the money? She asked. It's all gone, Greg muttered. We were just getting by. Ryan sighed, took out his phone. Then don't be surprised when the police come back. Mom, can I call now? Hannah didn't need to answer, but before Ryan could press the button, a sharp scream rang out from outside the camper. Mandy had just opened the door when she froze. Her parents were standing right there, faces red, eyes blazing with fury. Mandy! The man shouted. What the hell are you doing? Is this what we raised you to be? Ryan gave a faint smile. I invited them too. Fair's fair, right? The air inside the camper exploded. Greg's jaw dropped. Mandy turned pale, while Hannah, after everything, stood tall, took the keys, held her son's hand, and walked away from the lives of the betrayers like a reborn queen. Hannah sat in her living room, the warm yellow light filling the small apartment. No longer a place full of sorrow, but now a base for her rebirth. The camper van had been returned, parked safely in the lot outside, like a trophy from the battle she and Ryan had fought together. But what made her feel stronger than anything wasn't the vehicle. It was what had happened right after that fateful encounter in the pine forest. The moment Mandy screamed upon seeing her parents, the scene turned into a tragic comedy. If it hadn't been so bitter. Mr. and Mrs. Simmons, Mandy's parents, saw their daughter sitting in a stolen vehicle with a married man who had a wife and child, and immediately exploded in fury, their faces red, voices echoing through the forest. Mandy, what have we taught you? Her mother shouted. You drove this woman to bankruptcy, stole her car, drained her savings, and now you're pregnant with an unemployed man? Greg stood frozen like a statue. Mandy tried to defend herself. I thought he was going to divorce first. You thought? Her father trembled with rage. You've lived 30 years on this earth and all you can say is thought? Today, in front of the victim and a child your son's age, we officially disown you. No one said anything more. Greg's silence now was louder than any excuse. He, who was once a husband, a father, a life partner, had become small and pitiful, exposed and seen through by everyone around him. Ryan, standing quietly next to Hannah, delivered a cold sentence that made Greg stagger. You didn't just lose Mom. You lost my respect. And once that's gone, there's nothing left. Mandy collapsed, sobbing in humiliation. Greg, with nowhere left to hide, turned to Hannah, eyes pleading for a shred of forgiveness. But all he received was a resolute look. I don't hate you, but I won't let you walk away without paying the price. Immediately afterward, Hannah took out her phone and called the police officer who had stepped back earlier. I want to officially proceed with reporting the theft of assets and personal funds, she said. I have all the evidence ready. Photos, bank withdrawal documents, GPS locations, and an additional charge for the person involved, an accomplice. Not long after, red and blue lights flashed through the darkness of the forest. 2 patrol cars rolled in like the final bell ringing for Greg and Mandy's string of mistakes. The two were escorted away amid cries, screams, and the wounded gazes of those they had once believed were allies. A week later, Hannah sat at a lawyer's office. On the table was a formal request for financial compensation of $20,000, along with a commitment that Greg would pay $500 per month in child support for Ryan, deducted directly from his wages at a factory where Hannah had referred him to work. No more begging. No more blaming. Only the law and consequences. Greg initially reacted furiously. I'm not going to work like a slave just to pay off debt for you. The lawyer calmly replied, It's not for her. It's for your son, and for what you owe society. A few days later, the first payment landed in Hannah's account. It wasn't much, but it carried a clear message. Taking responsibility is the bare minimum of being human. As for Mandy, she was completely disowned by her family. Not only that, as an accomplice, she was also held jointly liable for part of the damages if Greg failed to fulfill his obligations. The pregnancy she had flaunted turned out not to be Greg's, just as Ryan had suspected and subtly confirmed with evidence based on the conception timeline. A different kind of happy ending, not with music and fireworks, but with justice. And to Hannah, that was more valuable than any romantic fantasy. That night, as Ryan lay sleeping beside her, Hannah looked at him and whispered, "We didn't fall. And from now on, we'll live for what we truly deserve." No one came to rescue her. She had rescued herself. And from the depths of pain, Hannah rose, stronger than ever before. Summer in Phoenix is not gentle. The scorching sunlight radiating from the asphalt could exhaust anyone. But for Hannah Walker, the blazing rays of this June no longer symbolized oppression. They felt more like a reminder. You survived. Now it's time to shine. After winning the lawsuit against Greg, after court hearings, signing papers, reclaiming the car, and restoring her dignity, Hannah realized something even more important. She still had Ryan, the smart, strong, and full of potential boy. Hannah started over from her small apartment, not waiting for a miracle, not relying on anyone else. She spent the first week cleaning every corner, not just physically, but mentally too. The wedding photos were taken down, keepsakes packed neatly into a cardboard box, not burned, not thrown away in anger, just simply put where the past belonged, behind her. Meanwhile, Ryan gradually returned to his everyday life like a normal child. He helped his mom mop the floors, learned to make simple breakfasts, and maintained his habit of reading every night. Though only 10 years old, Ryan possessed a sensitivity that moved Hannah deeply every time she looked at him. "Mom," one evening, Ryan looked up from his laptop screen. "I found a website that can help you sell the camper van. The price isn't bad." Hannah laughed. "Are you planning to be my financial assistant now?" Ryan shrugged. "Didn't you say I'm the CEO of my own life?" Hannah hugged him, her heart full of pride. That's right, she no longer had to struggle alone. From a life weighed down and stuck, the two of them had found a new rhythm. Not flashy, but steady and strong. She sold the camper van for nearly $26,000. Less than what they paid, but it was a start. Hannah used that money to pay off credit card debt, cover some living expenses while she still couldn't return to the hospital due to health reasons, and save the rest in a new account. This time, in her and Ryan's names only. On top of that, Hannah did something she had never dared to do before. Applied to study for a clinical psychology certification. What she had gone through, from betrayal to financial shock to the healing process, made her realize that many women out there were silently collapsing too. And if she could rise again, she wanted to help them do the same. She chose online evening classes, studying while caring for her son, and writing a journal about her journey. Writing to let go, writing to remember, writing to inspire. One evening, after finishing a class, Hannah posted an excerpt from her journal on a forum for single mothers. Within a few hours, hundreds of likes and comments poured in. "Thank you. I was just left by my husband. Your post made me feel less alone." "You are so strong. I cried when I read the part where your son said, 'You didn't just lose Mom, you lost my respect.' I need someone like you to talk to. Would you be willing?" Hannah sat silently, staring at the screen. She never imagined that she, someone who had collapsed less than 3 months ago, could now become a pillar for others. But deep down, she knew. This was exactly what she was meant to do. Ryan, lying on the couch flipping through a book, looked up and asked, "Mom, you look healthier today." Hannah smiled, nodded. "Because I've learned to forgive, not your dad, but myself. Forgive for once being weak, once being naive, once loving the wrong person. But now, I love the right one." Ryan looked at her, eyes bright. "Who is that?" "I love myself," she replied, "and I love you." In the golden light, the two of them sat together as a living testament to resilience. The losses couldn't be erased, but they couldn't stop two souls in the process of healing. And from here, Hannah knew. They were rewriting their future with their very own hands. One early autumn morning, as the sunlight was still as gentle as velvet and a breeze swept softly through the window of the small apartment in Phoenix, Hannah stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of her light blue shirt, the shirt she jokingly called her starting over shirt. She looked no different from any ordinary office worker. But for this woman, every step she now took was a declaration. I survived, and I will soar. Ryan was having breakfast in the kitchen. On the table were 2 slices of toast, a glass of nut milk, and a history book he had just borrowed from the library. Everything looked perfectly normal, but only those who had once lived in darkness would understand that normal is a luxury one must fight long and hard to attain. Hannah had just received a part-time job at a local women's support center, the same place she once came to for counseling after the shock of her divorce. She didn't just want to work to make a living, but to pass on light to women who were lost, just as she once was. She was no longer the exhausted nurse who collapsed in a hospital room staring at the ceiling as if the world was about to crumble. Now, she was Hannah, a single mother, a woman who had pulled herself from the depths, and someone redrawing the map of her life with trembling but determined hands. Ryan spoke, breaking the silence. Mom, today's your first day at your new job, right? Yeah. Do I look like a super cool chief advisor yet? Ryan laughed. You look like someone who could control the whole universe. Hannah walked over and patted her son's head. That sentence warmed her heart in a way that words couldn't describe. She had once thought she would never hear things like that again, after everything. But that boy, somehow, had always been the steady compass leading her toward the light. At the center, Hannah quickly blended in with the support team. She began sharing her story in small group meetings. Other women, from a young girl newly separated to a mother of 3 who had been financially abused, fell silent as Hannah recounted the bank account drain, the GPS, the court hearings, and even the look in Ryan's eyes when he asked his father, why? An older woman held her hand after a session. You have no idea how your story saved me. I was about to sign over the house to my ex just to get it over with, but now I'll fight. Hannah smiled, not out of pride, but from understanding. Once you stand up, the light from you will illuminate the path for others. Her life wasn't a Hollywood movie. No wealthy man appeared to save her, no money fell from the sky. But she had the most genuine things: a meaningful job, a thoughtful son, a warm enough apartment, and a heart that had learned to love itself again. That evening, as the two of them sat out on the balcony, gazing at the star-filled sky, Ryan asked, Do you think Dad will change? Hannah was silent for a moment, then answered, not bitterly, not with resentment. I think some people change, some don't, but no matter what, you and I, we'll keep moving forward. Ryan nodded. The boy rested his head on his mother's shoulder, eyes closing. The peaceful air enveloped them, needing no poetic words, no grand declarations. Hannah whispered softly, as if to herself, I once thought I had lost everything. Turns out I was just beginning to find myself again. And as the night closed in, a new chapter began, not with an alarm bell, but with the belief that even the cracks in a heart can still bloom,